Okay, so this panel is called How to Get Funded or Get Acquired, in case you didn't know. I just would like everyone on the panel to briefly introduce yourself and let us know if you have been funded, have been acquired, or have acquired a company, as well as which ones.
Hi, I'm Bill Babel. I was funded by this guy and acquired by this guy. And now I work at Rackspace. I started webmail.us, an email hosting company that we started about 10 years ago.
Where are you from?
Blacksburg, Virginia.
And I'm Jim Curry, and I run corporate development for Rackspace, and I've been involved in funding and buying companies.
My name is Pat Condon. I'm one of the founders of Rackspace, and I have been funded, and I suppose acquired too, or acquired a company. So,
my name is Josh Baer, and I'm kind of in the same boat. I've founded, funded, been funded, and the other one.
That's fun.
not at the same time.
Actually, often at the same time.
I've raised money once and bootstrapped twice. Both of those were sold, the ones that I didn't raise money on. So there's a little message for you right there, a little piece of information right in the intro.
Rappers frequently write back in the day songs recounting the time before they made it big. When you were still new, what would your back in the day song be like, and what kept you hungry?
Probably the song, whatever song I choose would probably have to do with making a ton of mistakes and just being persistent.
That skips me.
Well, how about when you first started acquiring companies, what was it like? Because you're having to do pretty big deals and make pretty big decisions.
Yeah. Jealousy. I think when I first started working with these guys, it's when you're in a position and you're looking at acquisitions, it's amazing how much you look at someone and say, gosh, why didn't we think about doing that? And so with these guys in particular, Rackspace was a much smaller company back then. I don't remember how many people we were. But what was interesting is finding that mix of people that get our culture and what we're trying to do, but also just doing some neat, interesting things. And so we got a lot of ways very, very lucky with these guys. So I don't know if there's maybe Lucky Star by Madonna would be a good thing. But we got really lucky in that we found a really good company to be our first acquisition, thanks to a lot of hard work by these guys.
So, gosh, I don't know if I have a song. When you're a young company and you're bootstrapping, you end up getting pretty close with the people you work with, and you work hard, but you play hard too. And there was an early racker that that thought he could really sing. And so, there was a place we went pretty much every day after work. We had a $1 beer night like 3 days a week, and invariably the night turned into a karaoke night. And this guy loved the song "Baby Got Back." and he could get up there. I mean, he was kind of like a staple of this place. He'd get up there, at least once a week and sing the song. And when I think back at the early days, that is our startup song, for what it's worth. He's no longer a racker, but I know he's still singing it somewhere.
So, I think back to the early days of Skylist, which was my first company. I got the umbrella over there, if you didn't catch it. But we were like a total dormroom.com in like the late 90s. And so it was like started literally in my fraternity house. And that led to a whole bunch of stories I probably can't tell. And then after that, we came here and we all lived on first I had a house on a street, and then everybody else that worked for me had another house on the street, and then we got another house on the street and we made that the office. And we would just like skateboard back up and down the street from between the houses. And there was lots of video game breaks and other things that weren't very conductive to work. But that's what I think of when I go back to that.
Back in the day.
I think the song would have to be "Stairway to Heaven," because it sucks until you get there or something. Yeah, I mean, I think everybody who bootstraps and is successful has this song of not spending money and suffering. And so probably what we do here is we'd swap suffering stories, and I'd talk about how we straightened paper clips and reused them, and someone else would say, we dug up worms in the backyard and ate them because it was cheaper, and someone else tapped out, Ethernet packets and Morse code in the back so that we'd have to pay Time Warner or whatever. Like that actually is the story of bootstrapping, is like, you literally do something with nothing. I mean, that's really what you're doing, something with nothing. So all the stories, I think, have that in common. I certainly have.
So the notion of getting funded by a VC or high power angel investor is very intimidating because these guys have lawyers and money
And NDAs.
and NDAs and all that fun stuff, and so guns. Well, I don't know that VC, but like if you're a college kid in a dorm room coding, how do you deal with it? Like, and why would you choose that route? And I guess that question is more or less for you two because you have taken funding before, or really anyone who wants to answer it.
Well, the first thing I'd say is don't deal with it if you don't have to. Things have changed a lot in the past 10 years, never mind the past 5 years. And so you should be able to get really far without raising money, and you should be able to prove a lot and get something out to market probably without doing that. And so then you're going to feel a lot more confident going to a VC when you actually know the thing you're talking about and you've done it a bunch and you've learned some lessons, and you won't feel so intimidated.
Another thing is, if it's your first startup and you're really in a dorm room, maybe it's okay if you get taken advantage of and violated the first time. Really. I mean, if you're the founder of it, this isn't the best outcome, but then again, it's not the worst outcome. It's better than nothing. Really, so you sign all the crap and it sucks and they do all kinds of stuff and you have all these awesome stories about how you built this great company and you had this great idea and it was awesome, and then they screwed you after 3 years, they fired you, and later when the company did really well, you only made a couple of $1 million and you could have been like hundreds of millions. That's not so bad. And you get that, and by the way, if the company does well, you still get that on your resume. You're still that guy who raised the money. And if you literally have no resume, if you really have no product, because like Josh said, if you can build it yourself, then do that, right? But if you really have nothing and you want to get some money anyway, well, what the hell?
Yeah, I'll second what y'all both said. That was good. I think the other thing is it doesn't take a lot of money to get something like a proof of concept today. And even actually back, at least when I did it at Rackspace with my partners, and we were in a pretty capital intensive business, we could at least get a few customers and prove that there was a model there before we went and tried to raise a lot of big money. But I think one of the keys is find people who understand your space, who've done it before, who are entrepreneurs or were entrepreneurs, and get it, before you take that big step and try to go pitch a truly professional investor. I think that's just kind of a misstep. I think you need to go find somebody, at the very least for guidance, even if it's not for money. So find somebody, get a prototype, get a customer, find somebody that understands your space.
I would add one more thing on that too. The other thing is, especially as a first-time entrepreneur, usually you get all excited about your idea and you think you've got the idea and it's right and it's not, and you're going to figure that out like a year later as you go try to do it. And in general, I'd say most entrepreneurs have a feeling that they should raise more money than they need sooner than they need to. And so just keep that voice in the back of your head kind of pushing things out, that it doesn't feel good because it feels like, if I just had money, this would all be easy. I know exactly what I want to do, and just give me the money so I can go do it. But it actually it doesn't really work that way. And as much as it feels a little uncomfortable to not have all this money behind you or to not be so certain about it, usually you're better off waiting longer and raising less and trying to do more with less.
I'll just jump in. I think we could go a lot of different directions with the VC angel discussion, but for the scenario that you outlined, which is you haven't been funded before, you're in a dorm room, you're not going to get a good VC to really spend a lot of time with you. It's just really hard. I think your better route is to find someone like these guys who are very much involved, and not only in looking for businesses to fund, but these guys are actually actively involved in helping build those businesses. So Pat, for example, was very involved with helping to build out the webmail business and turn it into a working business. And also, look, I don't think those people are as they're not going to screw you as much on the terms as you get from a VC if you're in kind of that position. So obviously it depends on the situation you're in, but I think if it's your first time, you're going to go much better finding someone that's an angel that can really help you build the business, learn how when you go to a VC what you should be doing.
Yeah, and I'll add, I agree with what Josh said about like waiting as long as you possibly can, because you typically don't have the right idea the first time around. But if you raise all this money around this idea, the VCs are expecting you to continue on that path, and it's going to be a lot harder to change paths when somebody's already invested in that path. So that's one thing, and then the other is when you're bootstrapping it, you make actually a lot of really smart decisions because you're efficient. You don't buy the most expensive Mac. You buy something that's probably more suited to what you need. You don't buy fancy furniture. You buy $50 folding tables. And even today, actually, it was 9 years into the business before I finally got my folding table taken away because everyone wanted to switch to the furniture that they have at the Rackspace corporate office. So, but I mean, we still, because of our history, we make a lot of really financially smart decisions that you don't see a lot of companies making, and I don't think the companies that raise money their first year are making those same decisions.
Yeah, I know you want to keep going, Michelle, but I have to pile onto that one too. That's been one of the interesting things for me with OtherInbox, where it's not my first startup, and I have more resources, but trying to make myself do those same things. And so we get our office space for free. All of our furniture we've gotten for free. Like we used not bad furniture, but I got someone to donate to, someone that was upgrading and they had old office furniture. We try to be as scrappy as we can, and I try to always remind myself, like, okay, this isn't the company that's making a lot of money that's already grown. We have to be a startup again. And I have to act that way.
Yeah, this is a good discussion. So some more specific stuff is, if you don't have a track record, and even if you have a product, VCs aren't stupid. They know your idea also will change as you test the market. In fact, hopefully it will. Hopefully you're not just going to follow a path because you raise money on it. In fact, one of the jokes is that the first round is to figure out what the hell you're going to do, and the second round is actually to go do it. Of course, that's not your pitch, but everybody knows that that's kind of how it works. And so some really good advice is to prove that you can learn, that you are testing and reacting and changing. And for an example of that, I forget who blogged it. I don't know if it was Steve Blank or somebody, and it was a guest post, so you'll have to Google it. But somewhere, someone posted all of the stack for Cafe Press. The guys who make shirts, and now they make everything. Well, when they raised money, their entire deck, it wasn't about, this is the team, and this is how we're going to grow, and look at our hockey stick. That wasn't the pitch. The pitch was, one after another, we tried all this crap, and then we learned this. Then we tried this other stuff, and then we learned this. That was the whole thing. It was like 10 things that they learned. And what they were proving is, as time passes, we are more profitable, we have more revenue, we understand the market better, we bring more products to market in a consistent way, and just all we do is make more and more money, and we know how to do that. That is much more powerful than any given idea. That should be kind of apparent. And VCs are not as dumb as we often make them out to be. They know that. They respond to that. So especially if you don't have a track record, especially if you don't have, 10 years of a product going already. Well, that's too long, but that's something that you can demonstrate no matter what. No matter how big you are, you can demonstrate that you can improve, that you are measuring and improving. So maybe that's what the pitch deck should look like.
I noticed that Rackspace's acquisitions tend to be bootstrapped or very slightly funded. Like, if you look at Rackspace, we don't have lots of VC money coming into these startups. Do you think that VCs affect that decision? Is that a cultural thing because Rackspace was pretty much bootstrapped? Like, how did that work out?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think one of the, there's a couple reasons why companies buy other companies. One is to, acquire revenue, and another reason might be to acquire a certain technology that is easier, faster, better, cheaper to buy versus build. And our whole approach is we've grown organically since the beginning, and we found it always cheaper to acquire customers organically than to buy that revenue from somebody else. So we've never found an exception to that case. And so for us, at least, there's a lot of cool technology innovation going on in our space. And for us, one of the kind of decision points is this neat technology about to cross the chasm into the mainstream? And that's kind of one of the things that, and so I think there's a lot of neat stuff going on. You know, when it's time for us, it's usually not the very, very, very bleeding edge early adopters. It's when it's going to hit mainstream for us that it makes a lot of sense for us to acquire neat technology. And so for us, it is really about, is this a neat technology? Does it fit with the rest of what we're doing and our kind of vision of the world? And is there a great team that comes with it? The revenue is not a decision point for us. I don't know if you have any-
I think the revenue can actually be, in some ways, a little bit of a distraction. The bigger the company is you acquire, the more decisions and paths have already been set. Makes the integration sometimes a little bit more difficult because whatever price you pay has some value in there for the revenue, not just for the potential and for the team. But I think in the case of why we've acquired companies that haven't been really venture funded, I think Bill hinted at some of this with his story, which is the scrappiness is really important. These guys had a mindset of, we're paying with this with our own dollars. We made all these decisions, and if you ask them why you did particular things, they had very well thought out reasons because they knew that those decisions were life or death for the company. We also felt like these guys were very good at generating and looking at new ideas in themselves. So I think Pat, Bill, Kevin, who's the MailTrust team we bought, had been in this market for 10 years when we bought you in some way, shape, or form. Been in it for a long time. And they were experts in what they were doing. And so there's for us, buying the expertise wasn't from buying from the VCs, it was buying from the entrepreneurs. I will say that VCs, look, VCs are not sharing the same, this is not a bag on VCs. VCs add a lot of value, but in a situation like this with the entrepreneurs, VCs can add a lot of complications. They don't always have the same objectives as the sellers do, and we run into that a lot. And sometimes that's great for the seller, sometimes it's not. One of the things that I've done a lot of math on with some of the folks we've talked to is once you raise money, the price at which you have to sell to make the same amount of money goes up substantially in most cases. The willingness of the VC to sell doesn't match that either. So in other words, if you own 100% of a company worth $10 million, sell half of it and have to sell for $20 million to make that same $10 million, VC is not going to be willing to sell at 20. They're going to wait till you get to 100. And they see 0 as an acceptable outcome because they've got 10 other companies they're looking at making a return on. So that adds complications to what we're looking at too, in that we're working with entrepreneurs who are willing to join our cause, are willing to merge with us and make a return with Rackspace, and can do it at a level that's much more affordable for us based on where they are. And I think we found that with VCs, it adds another layer of complication that makes it a lot harder to do.
I think one last thing on that point is more than any of that stuff, at least for us, the cultural fit really, really matters. We have a pretty strong culture at Rackspace, and if the company we're buying does not share our value system, it's just not going to work, period. It doesn't matter how small or big it is. And I think that kind of trumps all the other stuff we said, really.
And building on that, the culture really matters because we weren't selling our business to Rackspace to exit. And I think I can speak for Slice Host and Jungle as well. We were at the point where we had two options: either go out and raise VC money to accelerate growth, or essentially be funded as part of a larger business. So we look at more as Rackspace funded our growth, and we built a much larger business over the past 3 years with a little bit less risk on the table because we did it as part of a larger company with deeper pockets. But if we didn't do that, we would have actually went out to the VC market to accelerate our growth.
And you had a clear path on that too. I mean, you had a pretty good path.
Yeah,
there was a viable alternative.
Yeah, we knew we had a couple $1 million in hand that we could have taken, but we felt this was a much better option.
Well, I think also just to speak about where you guys are, I think the 3 companies that we bought, they all run those parts of our business and have built it. So really when Bill joined the team, they took over. We already had a mail business. They took that over, and they've driven it in completely better and new directions. And that's been the same way with every single one of our acquisitions. It's not been about just buying assets. We find companies that have a common vision, a common purpose, are excited about joining the Rackspace mission and bringing that purpose to be part of it. And
That's why culture matters.
Culture matters, yeah.
We've talked a lot about scrappiness and heart and fighting for it, but what is the luckiest thing that has happened to your startup that has added to your success?
I'll take that one. When we were before we were paying ourselves, somehow, I don't want to name the customer, but somehow we landed this Fortune 500 company from the basement of this house with little yappy dogs in the background, with the power going out. and we were on our last couple $1,000s in the bank, and we landed this deal that was about a $50,000 check that we got to do some development and further our product. And if we hadn't have gotten that, who knows where we would have been, where we would have gotten the money to keep the lights on. But the fact that we did it from the basement, and we had, a phone system and a website that made us look like a much larger company than we were, just helped a ton. And this is back in 2002, before it was easy to do those things.
On the eve of our failed first IPO in 2000, we were about to open we were about to sign a lease in a big data center in Hong Kong, and we were barely getting it right at home base here in Texas, and this was going to be a tremendously expensive thing for us, and the IPO bombed as the .com bust happened, and through a weird confluence of events, the lease didn't get to the right person to sign right on time, and got delayed, and the IPO, it was one of those things. It was kind of a comedy of errors, and if we had signed it, it would have spelled disaster for us. And there were probably 3 or 4 events like that in our past that, just dumb luck, things didn't get done right. We just dodged some major bullets. And we certainly wouldn't be at the point we're at today if all that didn't happen. And that was just a lot of luck.
There were a lot of things that made us lucky. One thing that I think back to, not to share too much Rackspace love here today, but as we were growing, we were hosted at Rackspace. This is back in 2000, 2001 maybe, and we were growing, and we were able, because of our relationship with Rackspace, and because partly because I met Pat at the time, we were effectively able to get Rackspace to vendor finance our growth. And so we didn't explain that to them at the time, but the way it worked was, yeah, right. But we could take on new customers, and we would get new servers at Rackspace, and then they would send us a bill 30 days later, and then we would take like 3 months to pay that bill, and they would let us let us pile up some pretty big charges. And so what that let us do was take on a new customer and go start making money off them to be able to then catch up and start paying them. And it allowed us to grow very quickly. And that was a really key relationship for us. And it would have been very difficult for us to, we were in a situation at that time where we actually would get a new contract and we'd have to figure out, like, can we take on this customer because of the capital expenditures involved, because of the other things, like, can we make this work? And that really helped to make it work for us.
Well, for me, it's easy. The very fact that my company got bought was completely lucky. So for 2 reasons. So after the company got bought, the shields came down on the Starship, because now I was part of the group, and they wanted to acquire more companies. They wanted my help. So I said, okay, but you have to tell me all the inside scoop about when you acquired me. And so one of the things that I learned is how they found out about me and my company and why they bought it. And the answer is because the VP of the VC that ended up buying the company completely saw an ad in Dr. Dobbs and ripped it out and handed it to his little minion guy and said, call these guys. That's literally it. Not me pounding the pavement with my little slide deck. Okay, big slide deck, never mind. Not that. It was, they noticed an ad and tore it out. Like, it's that ridiculous. And it happened to work with what they needed to do. The other reason it was lucky is the timing. I closed literally right before January 1st, 2008. If it had been 1 year later, what happened. I would still be here at Smart Baer, not on the panel though, because I wouldn't have had an event. I would just be a guy struggling in the economy. So now, of course, I couldn't have even known that ahead of time, but there you go. I mean, look, geez, it's everything.
By vendor financing, I've seen a ton of our customers do this really, really well. I mean, it's just kind of a form of bootstrapping, but figuring out how to borrow from your vendors, borrow from your customers. I mean, getting to pay up front. You'd be shocked at how. I know you guys did this really effectively too. I mean, I've seen customers of ours who bill their customers every month. They just ask customers to prepay a year. I mean, they'll get 30% of their customers to prepay a year just for asking. I mean, you don't really even need to offer a discount. Many of them do, and that helps. But I mean, it's shocking how you can, especially if your customers like you and the price point is right, they will help you finance your business. And so I encourage you all to try it if you haven't, because it works.
And back in my story, I still think that the largest check I ever wrote was to you. It was like a $450,000 check or something.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
One thing.
you,
One
man.
thing on that about the company we bought called Slice Host, they actually used that concept to market their product better. When we bought them, they had a huge wait list, and they advertised the fact that, to get a new slice, you have to get on the wait list, and there's a big market about it. There's lots of tweeting about it. How do I get on the wait list? It existed because they could not afford to write a check for new servers until customers paid for them. And it turned into a big marketing boondoggle. It was like, this is where I want to be. I want to host for these guys. And we've had a hard time turning it off because it's been effective for the company. But yeah, it's a great way, and it really did contribute to their growth. It allowed writing checks for servers. Obviously, for a startup, is an expensive thing to do, and they found a way to handle that.
Where do you think the sweet spot is for an exceptional startup, especially if you are looking to get funding or acquired?
Well, the personal life one is easy. You just have to integrate the business into your personal life. There is no line when you're doing a startup. The others are tough, and you have to focus on customers. The customers are what make your business. I think you have to understand what they want and get out there, because, like I said a few questions ago, you typically don't know all the answers, so you have to get out there and listen to your customers.
Well, I think that the short answer to that is, I think the best form of marketing is taking care of your customers. Serve them well every day, overserve them, and we have a word for it in our business. And I think there are a lot of businesses that have this philosophy, a lot that don't have this philosophy. And I think it's over investing in serving your customers. It's an expensive thing to do, and it's a big leap of faith, especially up front, because you don't get that payoff tomorrow or next week or next month. And I think, especially in this internet age we all live in, we expect instant results. And investing in your customers, you don't get an instant payoff. But you got to believe over the long run, all the profit, all the finance, EBITDA, whatever you want to call it, will work itself out. But I think if there's one thing you can do, it's invest in your customers, serve them well, and the rest will work itself out.
I think the biggest difference for me now between my first startup and OtherInbox now is truly the saying about you want to work on your business, not in your business. And so with my first company, I really did everything. And with OtherInbox, I don't. I've got a great team that runs it, and it lets me focus on thinking about the business and growing the business and and making the business work better as opposed to me doing the stuff that makes us work. And that was a big change for me that I think it helps us a lot.
We have a really close-knit group back in Blacksburg. The teams kind of they work together, they go out to the bars together, they hang out at the Tech football games together, Virginia Tech. They do a lot together, and when they're out at the bars, they're talking about work, and it's because they love what they do. And if you can find employees that think like entrepreneurs about this stuff and just enjoy talking about work in their personal life, it actually creates a good work-life balance if you actually enjoy what you do.
Okay, you're building this product, right? When do you know that moment has hit where you're like, okay, I need a little kickstart, I need a little funding? When does that moment hit, if ever?
It was when we couldn't put any more money on our credit cards, when we had maxed them out. It was we have a really capital-intensive business. We make a big investment in every customer up front, and you can only do that so long and grow so fast before you just run out of credit and wait for the return on it. So for us, it was pretty obvious. We just couldn't afford to grow without outside funding. And we did that through a series of fundraising events, starting with local angels, then local, more professional investors, then truly professional venture capitalists. But for us, it was pretty clear. But we didn't do it before we had our first 50 or 60 customers that were paying us. I can't say our customers were happy with us back then. We had kind of a denial of service model in the beginning, but it was clear that how the business model worked, and it was kind of easy to show that pattern and how replicable it was. So to us, it was kind of a necessary evil, and we did it, and it worked out.
Yeah, Jason made the point earlier that a lot of people's first round of funding is to figure out what they're going to do, and the second round of funding is to go actually do it. That is the way that it works out quite often. Excuse me. But ideally, if the right way to do it, if you can, is not to do that. To figure out really how the business works before you raise money, and to raise money not to figure it out, but to scale something that you already know that works. And so a lot of people say that fundraising or money in a company is like a magnifying glass. It takes whatever you're doing and it makes it much bigger, and it can make it move faster. But that means that can be bad, because if you're not doing the right thing yet, or you're pointed in the right direction, all you're going to do is burn a shitload of cash doing the wrong thing. So ideally what you want to do is really figure out your business first and be in a position where you feel like, okay, I really understand this. I understand the dynamics, and I know exactly what I'm going to do with this money. And I know I've proven that this is going to work. That's going to make me more money. That's going to make my business go. And so ideally, that's the right time to raise money, is when you figured out that model, you really understand it, and this money is just going to make you, it's just going to put gas in your engine to go a lot faster and to move quicker, but not to actually figure it out.
Yeah, actually, I really agree with that. There's like 2 points that you basically need some money to experiment with in the beginning and be okay losing it, and have investors that kind of understand that you're experimenting, or at least you convince them that you have the right idea. And then once you really have a clear path and understand, if you put $2 million here, you're going to get $10 million out, or 200,000 here, $1 million out. Once you have that is when you go after the big bucks. But before that, just look for money to experiment with.
So yeah, I agree with all that. Now let's make it concrete. How do you know when you've got something in which it's time to pour the money in, right? So go find a guy named Sean Ellis online, E-L-L-I-S. He's got a blog, and he's got some really great summaries on another blog called Venture Beat. And eventually I'll have an excuse to push my blog, but neither of those are. That's okay. That guy has a great way of explaining specifically what it means in the experimental phase to go find what he calls product market fit. And then once you have it, it's time to do whatever analogy you like pour kerosene on the fire or stoke the engine or whatever you like to say. But he has really specific, good advice about what that means to do. So look at that. And the other thing I'll say is that is a good route. That makes a lot of sense. Another thing that makes sense is to simply decide that fast growth is not important to you. Growth is important, but not fast growth, because then you don't have to raise money necessarily, because if indeed you have product market fit, or again, whatever analogy you like, then you can just grow. So that was me at my latest, at the last 2 companies I did. We simply were profitable. Now, I say profitable, but we were still straightening paper clips and eating worms, so that's sort of profitable. But profitable in the sense that we didn't have to raise money, in the sense that, and I'd pile on and say, you max out your credit cards and no one will give you any more of them, right? Like, all the way to the end. Anyway, we didn't actually have to get to that point, but part of that is because we grew really slowly. We didn't get to $1 million in revenue for 4 years instead of 1 or 2 or whatever. That was okay with me. I would rather grow, control is maybe the wrong word, but sort of under control, slowly, but in a way that I didn't have to raise money. So that's also an option, but you can't do both. Usually you don't grow really, really fast and not raise money. It happens, it happens, I'm not saying you can't, but generally, if you make your mindset one way or another, then you'll be more consistent in what you do and more likely to succeed in that particular path because you're being consistent.
You have some companies that basically sell themselves for pennies on the dollar for what they're actually worth, and then you have some companies that are offered $550 million by Google and turn it down. How do you get the Goldilocks just right valuation? This is for everybody.
Oh boy, well, you make a big assumption when you say the right value. That as if that exists. Skype was $2 billion and had no revenue or whatever. Yeah, Yelp, should they have sold? They thought it wasn't worth it in their calculus, and Google, did, and probably a lot of other people did. This is actually illustrative of the real point, which is that there's no such thing as the value of the company. There's 2 things. There's the person who's selling has certain goals that they want to achieve, and the person buying has certain goals they want to achieve. And if they overlap at all, that's good. Maybe something will happen. But when I sold my company, one of the things I wanted to achieve is not to maximize total dollars. Some people, it is. This is, again, not a matter of right and wrong. It's just a matter of what you want to do. For me, it wasn't maximizing total dollars. It was getting to a point where I never have to work again. I can do whatever I want. That's it. As long as I get to that point, it's okay if I don't make another $1 million. I just want to do that because that's really hard, and it's really great if it happens. So that's it. Was the value of the company right? You can go look at M&A charts and they'll show you multiples of this and multiples of that and growth charts and what industry you're in and other people that are doing it and you're in this percentile. It doesn't really matter because Skype had no revenue and was worth $2 billion. They probably are. What the hell? Is it strategic for the person buying it? Why do they want to buy it? Are they in a pickle? Do they have money they need to spend? Sometimes they have to spend money, so they buy something. It could be that bad. And these guys are going to be better at telling that side of the story. But there isn't a right valuation. There's just what is good for you, the seller, and good for someone else, the buyer, if that exists, and is there an overlap?
So I had a similar experience to Jason. I also bootstrapped my first company, and when I sold it, I had very similar goals. Right? It wasn't. It was a milestone for me, and it let me achieve something personally that I knew was going to affect my financial security. It was going to affect the future things I was going to do, and my biggest concern was like getting it over with as quickly as possible, so that I could go on to do the next thing, and not so much like if I wait another year, can I double the price or something like that. I just wanted to get on to doing more stuff. At the time that I was doing that, someone saying to me that I think you can interpret different ways, but it was helpful to me at the time. He said, the billionaire is the guy that always sold too early. And part of how I took that to mean was just obviously if you sell too late, that's bad. That's when things often don't work out. And so you never know when it's too late until it's too late. And so I try to be pretty opportunistic about it. And if you plan on doing something once and that's your only shot, well then maybe you might think differently about it and maximize it. If you think that this is if it's early in your career and you still think you're going to do other things as well, there's a lot to be said for getting any deal done and being able to have that in your back pocket and move on to the next one.
Well, I think what is something worth? It's what somebody is willing to pay for it at some level. But I think you hear the idea of valuation thrown around a lot, and I would just say that beyond the monetary valuation of something, the terms matter just as much, if not more, than the price that somebody is willing to invest in your company at, the rate at which they're willing to invest. Because with some terms, the value doesn't really even matter all that much. And I think that when you see these crazy valuations without the deal fully exposed, there's probably a lot of hair on it. There's probably a lot of clawbacks. Jim Curry can probably go into much greater detail in all the tricks of the trade. But that alone is just one metric, and I don't necessarily think it's the most important one to focus on all the time.
So just one a little bit different spin from the corporate buyer. Part of my job is to find people that are not going to walk away, but see the potential to create more value after the sale's done. So when we've bought our 3 companies, these are deals in which the owners retain significant interest in what we're trying to do and help us build the business. And so part of what we do in these discussions, and Bill can certainly address this, is make sure that we're also painting a vision that look, we are not buying you guys if you're leaving. You have to build this for us, and that's going to be a way for you to continue to make more money. So we don't view it so much as an exit, which is one way to look at obviously selling the company. You're done. You're moving on to your next thing. In the case of our acquisitions, we want to make sure that the sellers feel like that the chance to make more money and continue to grow their mission of what they were doing does not go away after the deal.
Yeah, so valuing our company is probably one of the toughest things we've ever done. One, because Jim's a good negotiator, and 2, because there's probably other companies out there that would have paid more for us, but that was the present value, and what we were really looking at is the opportunity, the future value for not just ourselves, but our shareholders, which were the friends and family that put money in. And so we spent a lot of time making sure that the vision that we had for the business, for the mail business, lined up with the vision Rackspace had for it, making sure that the control and autonomy we had to influence and affect that vision was still in our hands, as long as we continue to succeed with that. So we spent a lot of time thinking about more what's the future value, and as opposed to the value today. And then also, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out our value relative to Rackspace, which was difficult when they're a private company. So it's again, it was one of the toughest things we've ever done. We're much better at the technology than this sort of thing.
So
But we had a lot of good advisors too. I would say.
You had some good advisors.
So this point about the terms of it in particular, are you getting paid in cash or stock, and is there earn out and these other things? They're really, really important. I know Jason and I talked a lot at the time that he was selling his company, and from your perspective as an entrepreneur, without discounting these guys, because of course if you're selling your company to Rackspace, then there's this great future ahead of you, and it's all going to work out and it's going to be a huge success. But if you're not selling it to Rackspace, you kind of should assume that however much money you get on the day that you sign the deal is all the money you're going to get. And you should be happy with that. And if you're not, you really should think about it. Definitely you want to have a vision for where this is all going to go, and hopefully that vision can be much bigger. But part of selling your company is you're giving up control, and you're giving up your ability to affect those things quite a bit in many situations, maybe less in a better situation. But in a lot of times, you're not the decision maker anymore. You can't control all these other things, and you don't know what's going to happen in the future, right? That's part of net present value versus stuff in the future. And so, I think an important mindset going into it is thinking about how much cash am I going to get on the day that I sign this, and if everything else did get changed or messed up, would I be okay with that? Would I feel like this was a big mistake? And personally, I would I want to go into it feeling like, okay, on the day that I sign that, I'm going to feel okay with it, even if everything else gets screwed up.
Just one thing on the mechanics of doing a deal. I think we work with a lot of different companies. I think one of the mistakes you can do in a deal is, especially when it comes to terms, is let a lawyer be your only advisor. Get one of these guys to look at the terms and look at what you're doing, because they're going to give you better advice of what all this stuff means. They're going to give you a better perspective on it. You don't want it to turn into a discussion about all the different terms of a 200-page legal document. And one of the things I think these guys did right is they had a bunch of different advisors. The guys we've worked with had a large number of advisors. I do feel like the lawyers oftentimes are not working at the best purposes of the seller.
Yeah, actually, I agree. If lawyers had their way, deals would never get done. So one of the smartest things Jim's told me, actually he told me after we got our deal done, but it was basically when the next time he's looking at a company, he was going to basically make sure that people selling their business are educated on how deals are structured. Give them a book to read so they understand what they're about to get into when they're talking about all these different terms. Because a lot of the terms that we were talking about, we had heard for the first time, and that's not usually a good thing when you're negotiating.
So for those terms, that blog I referred to earlier, which is still not mine, venturehacks.com, really good for not only defining the terms, true, and also giving a lot of good advice, and not just that this is what it is and this is what can happen, but when you need to argue back, they give you they'll literally say, you can say this, blah, 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 blah. I gave you this concession because of whatever, and so, your reciprocity, the reciprocity that you would show for this is you would do blah, blah, blah. In other words, they tell you how to say it in a way, in the right way, in the true way. It's not to get something improper, it's just to arm you with some language and some attitude that, that will make sure that you're getting a good deal. Also, I'd like to clarify, just so that we're not saying Rackspace is awful for giving someone a future after they bought a company. In my deal, it was going to be for private stock. That's really different than a public company when you know what the stock value is and you have some notion that it's not going to go to zero, probably. Private company, still owned by VCs, by the way. They're VCs. Their thing is that 90% of the time it's going to go to zero. That's the point. And plus, in the meantime, it has no value still. So for me, in my particular example, the cash, it was all cash, and it was really important because of that. But Rackspace would be a completely different thing. So,
how do you get yourself in the position so that your pitch is effective and it actually does what it's supposed to do?
I think advisors are really important again here. We didn't really know what investors would be looking for. And actually, one of the things I was most surprised with going through the process, just talking to angels, we never went the VC route, but we were so passionate about the product and the customer and the technology, and that's what we wanted to talk about. But most of the people that were going to put up money to help us do this, they were more interested in how much do you need and how am I going to get it back. And then also, they wanted to just know that we were smart on the product, but they didn't really care as much about what the product was. So that was pretty eye-opening. And I imagine a lot of companies experience that when they go out to try to raise money.
We do some funding of companies. In fact, we looked at, after Pat funded the first round, we looked at funding webmail. I hate to say it, but the most simplistic way to get in the door is exactly this, which is just showing passion for the area that you're in and showing that you know a lot about it. When we had a discussion with Pat and Bill and Kevin about webmail and about the mail business, they were experts in it. They understood our problems, and they had solutions proposed that were really relevant to us that made us want to be funding these guys. I could think the same thing could be said for both Jungle Disc and Sliceos. This is obviously particular to talking to a company as opposed to talking to a VC, but I think if you go in and you're looking for strategic money, understanding really your business, showing passion for it and how you can solve real problems, it has led to us, certainly looking at funding companies we wouldn't have done before.
Yeah, I think I'll talk about it as on the investor side instead of on the pitching side, but passion in the founders. I think a group of founders that mesh well together, and I think people I trust. I wouldn't want to invest in anything in people I couldn't go have a beer with. If I can't like them, it's just, at least for me personally, it's not the right deal for me. And I think there's a lot of, beyond how good the idea is, I think there's a lot of personality fit. I mean, especially in the kind of the angel round or the early funding periods. I mean, you better like your investors, because if you don't do it. On either side, the investor shouldn't do it. The startup shouldn't do it. I mean, I think there needs to be some chemistry there.
That's actually where you get your best advisors, is people that put up money to it. So you kind of should be selective, find people that actually can help your business. And that's why we started talking with Pat.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, I'm sure this has happened to all of us up there, but we've all been pitched deals, and I'll get pitched deals that I really don't add any value to. All these kind of this new drug that's coming out that's going to change the world, and I'm like, sounds awesome, but I mean, it's just, I don't know anything about that. I can't help you. I would just be a money person, and that's, for me as an investor, that's not interesting at all. First of all, I don't know if it's going to work or not, which is scary as an investor, and second of all, I can't add any value to it. And I tell the person pitching the deal, you need to go find somebody who understands the space. Go find somebody who's worked in a drug company before. Don't talk to me. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, so a bunch of great points there. I think, especially first-time entrepreneurs, but even multiple-time entrepreneurs often have some misconceptions about what investors are looking for. As Pat said, investors generally invest in a particular space or something they're interested in. They know it doesn't matter if your company is a good idea if it's not something they're interested in. So you should know who you're going to talk to, because you can find out what kinds of things they're interested in. And on the other point. A lot of times, again, you want to get up and talk about your idea and the thing you thought up and the thing you're building, but there's a lot more to it than that, and usually that's one slide of like 12. On my blog, which is on austinpreneur.com, there's a great little case study of InfoChimps, another company here in town.
I was going to mention that.
And showing their pitch as it evolved, and even has some comments from his mom on there, actually. And it's great because it shows just like the first pitch and then a few others as it evolved over time. And it shows how much it can change. And it shows, you can see how uncomfortable he is at the beginning, and then by the end of it, how he's just rolling through it. That was a pitch he was doing for the demo conference. And one last point on that is with Capital Factory, which Jason and Pat and I are all mentors of, and hopefully you guys have heard of, but a huge part of what we do, it's not the main part, but it's just part of the routine, is pitching. At every single meeting, the first thing we do is we make all the companies, everybody in the room, not each company, everybody has to get up and pitch their company. And they have to be comfortable talking about it. And even the programmers have to be able to get up and they have to be able to talk about it. And we record all those through the process. And it's amazing to see the difference from the beginning of the program to the end of the program in how these people have learned to be able to be comfortable and to talk about their company. So just practice, practice, practice. Count how many times you do it. And you literally need to get to 100. And then you're like, okay, I'm comfortable with this, I got it.
Yeah, I plus one all this stuff and would say that it's a deal breaker if you don't. In other words, lack of passion, lack of the expertise, the deep expertise, like you should know more about it than everyone else in the room. So that no matter what they ask, you're like blowing them away with stuff. All the right investor, like these are literally deal breakers. If it's not true, you do not get it. End of story. And so I'll add one more, which is probably more controversial, which is that you should be honest. Which is not usually something that is in a negotiation book that you should tell the truth. It's more about, you should position and you shouldn't give this up until they give something up, and you can hold it in your pocket and later you can, that's fine, you can read all that stuff and I suppose some of that works. But really people know if you're being honest or not because the consistency is clear. And don't forget, again, the person you're pitching to probably has heard literally hundreds if not thousands of pitches. They kind of can tell if you're full of crap, they can tell if you don't really know. They can tell if you're new. And being new isn't necessarily bad, by the way, unless you don't admit that you're new. Unless you think you know the answers when you clearly don't. But if you say, that's one of the things we don't know. Here's how we're going to find out. We're going to put this in place and measure it, then we're going to do it, and then we'll know. You see, that's acknowledging that you didn't know something or whatever, or that it's not in place. No, that's a big risk. That is one of the huge risks here that you're taking on. Sure is. Here's how we're going to address it, and you know what? We may not succeed. Saying something like that, actually, I mean, it sounds bad that you're saying we might not succeed, but being that upfront about the problems that you have, or the gaps you have in your knowledge, that's the kind of thing that you feel more comfortable giving someone money, because they're like, that's a person who isn't going to bullshit me. This is a person who isn't going to tell me stuff that's not true. So like, if he says there's a problem, we can work on it. That kind of trust, that's part of building the trust. You know, I think that's key. Not everyone acts like that, and people who don't act like that sometimes get funded. So it's obviously not a deal breaker like these are, but I feel strongly about that one.
I agree 100% with that.
So I'm going to take a question from Twitter, if I can find it. It's from Tanner Moley, and it's how involved should you be with your business plan? Wait, can you speak to the importance of business plans?
They're not important. Next question.
How detailed should you get? What should be included? All right, so Josh has answered this, and then we will continue with Capital Factory. So.
I think we probably went through like 10 revisions of ours over the money raising years, and mostly it was because we were constantly looking for small chunks. We weren't going out for anything big, so we always had to have it ready. The biggest part we spent time on was the financial models. Things change. Like, you actually can predict the future a lot better if you have some history in there. So we wanted to start pumping as much history as we could in there. It was kind of painful because it's not the most fun thing in the world to write a business plan. It might be one of the least fun things. But we spent a good amount of time on it.
Was that worthwhile though?
It was worthwhile because it kept us really updating, like knowing where we were financially.
Helping you think about your business. Do you think
Yeah.
your investors read your business plan?
Not really. They cared more about us and our
Like,
passion.
did they actually read it, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm
Jim,
sure some
did you read his business plan?
Pat, did you read it?
Yeah, so what I would say on that is we don't, it depends what you mean by business plan. I think that, you know, getting back to this discussion about when you're pitching someone, and you're pitching an acquirer what they care about, I think it's just showing you have deep understanding and passion for the product and the customers and what you're trying to solve. We didn't pay, other than when we looked at their numbers, for example, we wanted to understand, you know, what are the cost drivers, you know, do they really understand how to grow this to be a profitable business? But honestly, we didn't care. I mean, that's something we cared about from the perspective of, do they understand their business? But we didn't really pay attention to what the numbers were. Are they going to be 10 million, 100 million, $1 billion in revenue? That wasn't important. But I think that again, when you're coming to talk to an acquirer, which again is very different than talking to a potential, someone that's going to fund, just showing that you really have a good command of the market, how you can bring it and help how your technology and yourself can help solve the problem is way more important than spending time on numbers or marketing plans or anything like that.
I mean, I don't know about you, Jim, but I have seen so many business plans that say year 3 it's going to be 100 million in revenue. And it's like, you know how many businesses in the world get to 100 million in revenue ever, much less 3 years? I mean, we can count them on 2 hands. And I think so. I think the business plan as a whole is not worth a lot. I think the unit economics, especially if a paying customer, for us at least, a paying customer exists, really matters. But I mean, you know, for me, part of the reason I think it's important for investors to stick with what they know is that they know the 5 questions to ask. And for me, it has nothing to do with how big the business could be. I mean, I'm kind of interested in the market, but I'm going to go figure that out myself before I invest. It's unit economics. You know, for us, it's what's your churn rate? You know, do your customers like you or not? You know, there are 4 or 5 questions to ask, but I think the business plan as a whole is, especially in the early stage, is kind of worthless.
Yeah, so when I said the business plan's worthless, I'm talking about the 40-page thick business plan, which you should never, ever write. Building a financial model, which is a part of a business plan, that's worthwhile, even though it's wrong, even though you don't have any idea how to do it, and you're making all these assumptions. That shows that you're thinking about your business, and it's a model for how you think about your business, and you can clearly communicate that and say, these are the assumptions, but I'm gonna verify these assumptions, I'm gonna learn about them as I get some history, and this model's just gonna get better and better. So that's, having a model is worthwhile. Writing a big business plan isn't. If you're gonna open a barbershop, you can write a business plan, because everybody knows how the barbershop's supposed to work. You know what your rent's gonna be, and you know how much you're gonna charge for haircuts, and like, you can go put together a business plan, and you can project it out. If you're creating a web startup for some new thing that nobody's ever done before, then it's a bunch of bullshit. You can't predict what that's gonna be, and what you're building is probably gonna change and be different anyway, and so it's a big waste of time. And most investors will never read anything more than 2 pages. And they might look at some charts or some other stuff, but you can put together that whole thing, they are not going to read it. So take that for what it's worth.
Yay, I get to finally plug my blog. Yay. Because I wrote all about this. But why you shouldn't write a business plan, and that's pretty much why. So now I guess you don't have to read it after
I read
all.
his blog.
Yeah, there you go. And what you should do instead, right, which is to, you can probably detect the pattern already. As soon as you start looking to the future, like Thursday, it's crap, right? Because you're going to do something different and blah, 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 all those reasons. But knowing what's happening today is extremely valuable. Being able to measure what is happening today, and are we acquiring customers, and are they leaving, and do they like us, and what is the product doing? And if we had $100,000 or $1 million or $10 million, what would we do with it? Is there something we could do with it that would actually grow the business or not? Like, these are what you might call marginal or incremental or immediate things, not projection things. Projection things, useless. Knowing what's going on now, good. Also, I'd even throw in there the whole learning thing. Like, the reason why people want to hear that you learn is because that's really what you do every day, and that is your plan. The plan is to keep trying to figure out what the hell's going on, try different things, and whatever's working, you do that some more. That's the plan. So the more that you are doing that, or can say that you're doing it, or have some numbers that say you're doing it, and have a financial model that shows how it's going to work out, even as you get more customers, it will work out, and that makes sense. But the hockey stick thing, everyone can draw the hockey stick, which is why no one cares. So there's lots of questions you should ask yourself that are constructive to sort of get yourself because the useful thing about writing a business plan is it causes you to be somewhat introspective, to answer questions like, who do we serve? Who is our perfect customer? Why do people buy this product? What's the real reason that they buy it, not the reason we thought when we started with? And so those sorts of things. These are the correct questions that a business plan makes you ask. So all I would say is, ask the questions without actually writing the damn plan. And so I get to plug the blog because the follow-up to the post that says don't write the plan is a list of questions like that.
So I just want to point out something about Jason's companies. It's interesting because it evolved into something different. And you should follow his blog to find out how. So there you go. If the audience would like to follow you guys and kind of know a little bit more about you, where would they find you?
If you just Google for Bill, and then the last name is Boebel, and you can find my Facebook, Twitter, blog. It's all there.
And you can email me at just jim.curry, Curry, Rackspace.
Email me, pat@rackspace.com.
I'm on Twitter, Joshua Baer, or I'm josh@oib.com.
And I got to plug it after all. On Twitter or the blog is @smartbear, and I'll be at the bar, and I drive a blue Mini if you really want to follow me.